Hola Kako guys, welcome to Just&True. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Instead of going over some prepping gear or prepping information, I'm going to be kind of dispensing some information. I know some of you and I have probably talked on one-on-one, and some of you may know that I have active intelligence and have some connections with active intelligence in the community. As well as plenty of you. I mean, we all have our own angles and our own connections. Pardon me 1 second. Make sure this cat doesn't bother me. But there's lots going on. There's tons going on right now. And it's not coincidence either. What we have going on now, I've been talking about probably for the last month. It's all coming to a head now. And I'm going to do it, kind of cover things by region, and then cover things by branch. And then probably even go into a little bit of other countries, military movements. But right now what we see within the United States Navy is something that we haven't seen in the United States Navy since World War II, which you'll hear me say probably a lot throughout this short video. We have our LVN strike groups, are going up to, these are our nuclear capable submarines, are going up off into the Sea of Okhotsk, which is right on the eastern area of Russia. It's this big open sea area. Of course we have our CVNs, which are strategic carriers, our air carriers, and the bigger fleets, like the ones we have in the Gulf and in the Pacific. Well, we have our Pacific Fleet here in Hawaii, and it actually had met up with the CVN, I think it's 77, with the USS Abraham, I believe. I could be wrong with that. I mix all these up. There's so many of them. They left the Philippine Sea, and they entered the South Sea of China. And right now, the South Chinese and the United States are head-to-head in the South Chinese Sea, and there's kind of a stalemate. And they're not moving. Neither side will budge. China is now threatening to attack us, and we're threatening to not leave the South Chinese Sea. We have allies in the Pacific region, which we are now having forward operation bases staging. I talked to my friend in Western Samoa, and I talked to a couple of my friends in the Philippines, and they said that there's actually being staging going on, which is just a forward operating base for the Navy. So in the Pacific, we're moving our LVNs and our CVNs, LPNs and our CVNs further to the west, further to the east, technically, going further towards Asia. So we took our current strike carriers that were in the Sea of Japan, and we went south through the Philippine Sea, and straight in the South Sea of China. So now we have one of the largest strategic groups, CVN groups, in the South Sea of China, being threatened by China if we don't leave, that they'll attack. It is their water. It's non-contested water. It's theirs. We were in the contested area, and we had left that and gone further in the Chinese area. In the Gulf's 5th Fleet has been met up with a little bit of the 4th. We usually don't have strategic, the LPN sub-nuclear class carrier or sub-nuclear class in the Gulf, but we actually just released 2. So we have 2 that have been unheard for. Usually they have checks, and they'll do military checks, and they'll let that information get out as long as it's not top secret. And once you see nuclear sub carriers, nuclear subs starting to make top secret movements instead of publicly doing training exercises or publicly doing OPEC security in the Gulf or publicly doing any of their war games, well, then it means that they're in waters that they don't want us to know about. So right now we have our nuclear capable subs that are in the Gulf more now than ever, and we have more of them there now more than ever. Of course, we know that the 5th Fleet, I've been beating a dead horse about this, Rear Vice Admiral Sterney was assassinated And for my opinion, it's because he didn't want to go along with false flag attack that Israel wanted to pin on Iran. We also have our the NATO fleet meeting up with our 71st, I believe. It's another CVN, Strategic Strike Group, going up into the Sea of Crimea. At the same time, we have our, what is it? It's another CVN group, but it's going down into the Caribbean. It's going down towards Venezuela because they're worried that if they don't put up a blockade now, Russia's not only going to have air power there, but they're going to have a Navy force as well. So I was in the Air Force, and I'm all hoorah about the Air Force. I mean, nobody in the Air Force who's hoorah about the Air Force. If you're in the Air Force, it's a job. If you're in the Army or the Marines or the Navy, you're proud about it. But if you're in the Air Force, you're like, yeah, I picked a job. So we have our Air Force, which is now kind of ramping up down in Florida, which has been weird. It's been weird since those I think it's V-10 bombers landed in Venezuela from Russia. So our Navy is definitely ramping up down there. It's getting closer and closer to Venezuela. We're putting out some weird little groups in the Gulf, which you never really see. I have a buddy of mine who's on an oil tanker, and he's seeing some. But the Gulf is tiny. The Gulf of Mexico is tiny, and he's seeing some little strike dirigibles basically flying in and out of there, wondering what's going on. Why do we have these dirigibles, these Navy dirigibles, all over the Gulf right now? Also, the Sea of Gibraltar. The Spanish did not back down. The Spanish are saying that if the Gibraltar Strait, rather, the Spanish are saying that if the English don't basically give back their property, they're going to attack. So you have the Spanish Armada, is what they used to call them, but the Spanish fleet and the English fleet are head-to-head in near Gibraltar. You have the United States fleet and the Chinese fleet head-to-head in China's contested sea. You see our Navy in the Sea of Okhotsk with whatever Russia has up there, which I'm unsure of at this point. And then you, of course, have the Crimean Sea, which is us, NATO, and the Ukraine, which the Ukraine is not technically an ally of the United States. So we don't need to back them up by any means, but of course we saw what happened with Czechoslovakia, the Czech land in World War II. If they let Russia slip, I should say, and gain more territory, it's not good for anybody. So we're going to be up there with NATO and with our Navy, as well as the Ukrainian Navy, head-to-head with the Russian Navy. There's a lot more going down in the Antarctic, which I'm really concerned about because you never see naval troop movement in the Antarctic. I'm wondering why we have a CVN class down there. If you guys know about the Antarctic, and there's a lot of conspiracies, man, and I love conspiracies. I eat them all up, and they tie in very, very tight to what's going on. But if you have any solid information about troop movement, military movement, about naval strategy and movement down there, please let me know, because all I know right now is that for the first time ever, we're putting CVNs in strategic strike groups down there, and that's never happened ever. It's also the very first time that Russia's entered the Western Hemisphere with military, period, which of course is those bombers. So there's a lot of really, really strange things going on. Now, kind of focusing a little bit on the Middle East and boots on the ground, we all know that Iran is not friends with Israel. We know that Iran are not friends with the United States. We do know that they're really good friends with Russia. Now, Russia is not supposed to be arming Iran because of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah being an international group of terrorists, but Russia is by far and large, without doubt, giving them their S-300s and 400s, possibly even S-500s, to stage around Iran for defense capabilities, but also Iran is then smuggling them into both Syria and Lebanon. And why Lebanon is very important is because Lebanon butts up and shares a border with Israel, and if anything happens to Israel, you better bet your ass that the United States will respond. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm no fan of Israel. I'm sure a lot of you are no fans of Israel. I love my Jewish brothers and sisters, but this goes above and beyond us as people, and this goes towards the countries themselves and the rulers and the elite. I hope you guys don't think that I'm bashing on Russia, I'm bashing on China, I'm bashing on any of these people. I'm bashing on their governments, absolutely. I'm bashing on their leaders, 100%, but their people, absolutely not. I'm a pacifist myself. My hands will shed no more blood in the name of any country, and that's just what I'm gonna do. In the name of any country, catch that part. But if someone tries to bust in my door and try and hurt someone I love, then I already got primer of blood on my hands, so this is going to be the second, third, fourth, or fifth coat. It's going to look like a really good crimson red. But if you don't have a primer coat of blood on your hands, stay away from it, because once you get that primer coat, you can't get it off. But that's another tangent. I digress. So boots on the ground, we're having those S-400s, S-500s. What those are, they're surface-to-air defense capable. They're like our THAAD systems, but our THAAD systems are antique. Our THAAD systems aren't very well. Our THAAD systems are underreported failures. I think that's for a specific reason. We have the capabilities of making a much greater and much more efficient surface-to-air defense system, but we don't. But these S-500s and S-400s are amazing at doing that. So we do have those S-400s, S-500s in Iran being supplied by Russia. They are sending them to Lebanon to be used as surface-to-surface missiles, which we've seen in the last few weeks. Iran getting a few missiles, or Israel rather, getting a few missiles being fired at them, and they're doing a really good job at shooting them down. Boots on the ground. So in Syria, we have very, very interesting things going on. We have Iran staging their own military bases in Syria, proxy war, obviously. We have Russia now just coming out and having no insignia men, no insignia black APVs or APCs, whatever you want to call them, armored personnel carriers, just like they did in Crimea in 2008 or 2011, whenever it was. And then, of course, we have us and the Syrian rebels and the Syrian army. So right now, we're really ramping up in Syria with the boots on the ground, because for the very first time, you're having established forward operating bases from every one of those groups. So obviously, the Syrian army and the Syrian rebels are there permanently, but now you're seeing permanent Iranian forward operating bases with surface-to-surface and surface-to-air offensive and defensive measures. You're also seeing Russia set up permanent or semi-permanent forward operating bases in Syria, because we, of course, are now setting up ours there, which is a big no-no. A lot of people don't know about, but we have more boots on the ground in Syria than the United States government and media would like to tell you. Getting over to Europe a little bit. Since the end of the Korean War, the DMZ has been the most heavily militarized border on the planet. Well, that's slowly becoming a thing of the past. Right now, the Ukrainian border, the Turkey border, and the Russian border has far surpassed what you have on the DMZ in the sheer number of troops, armored personnel carriers, artilleries, armament, cavalry. They're all down there. And what you see is staging. What I mean by staging is, at the very first, they sent over just a little bit of troops, and then they sent over the S-400s and S-500 surface-to-surface and surface-to-air missile defense systems. And now you're seeing about 5,000 to 10,000 armament cavalry going over there, tanks going over and setting up just like they did with the Czech land. If you guys don't know what happened with Russia and Czechoslovakia lately, basically they did a vote to see if they get a large swath of their land back, and they got it, surprisingly, just like the vote in Crimea. So we're seeing a huge surge of defense in the Ukrainian border, and they also have about 10,000 boots on the ground, just infantry, sitting and waiting. They did and still do have Ukrainian soldiers. They did attack the Ukrainian vessels, and they were provoked. I'm not sure. This is not a very popular opinion or popular point of view. Although the Ukraine is not our ally, I do believe that the Ukraine purposely poked the bear. They were not in international waters. They went straight into contested waters, and I don't know the who's, whys, and whats, but I'm getting to that. I'm trying to get some resources into what they were attempting there, because if you look at their actual movement and with their heading, they were going straight to Russia, and it's not something that a small sovereign country should be doing to Russia unless they were coerced into trying to start something. And it seems, this is my opinion, everything else has been fact. It seems in my opinion that the Russians and the Chinese are doing everything they can to keep their own hands tied behind their back. You see the United States naval movement into the Chinese Sea, and the China said, listen, we'll ram you, we'll barricade you, because when you ram another vessel, it's not an act of war. It's technically an act of defense. It could be considered an accident. No one really dies. There's no actual naval damage. So there's no war declared. Russia did the same thing to the Ukraine. Ukraine was going into the Crimean Sea, past the Crimean Sea, and up into Russia. And Russia rammed the boats instead of firing on them. You're seeing the same thing in Gibraltar now with Spanish and English. The Spanish said, we want our stuff back. The English said, we're not going to have that. So the Spanish are threatening to ram them. So it seems like we have these two powers. Let's not call them Axis and allies, because that's propaganda. That paints us as the allies and them as the bad guy. But let's just see them red team and blue team, okay, for all you Halo fans. Us, the United States, it seems, and all of our allies are trying to egg on the world at this point. We're trying to poke the bear. We're trying to poke the panda bear. We're trying to set up as much military as we can around Iran and Syria, trying to almost get someone to attack Israel so we can do something. Merkel, who's Chancellor of Germany, is on her way out. She's about to be replaced with another supreme leader for the next however long Germany does it. I think it's like 10 years or 15 years, I forgot what it was. But they also have troops heading straight for the border as well. So for the very first time, when was the last time you guys remember having 20,000 German troops at the German border? Anything ring a bell? Also in Mexico, obviously, a lot of people already know that the Russian military has had contracts to build armaments in northern Mexico for the last 7 years, I believe. Those factories are pumping out tanks like that. A while ago, that whole hot musket mess kind of sort of touched upon it. We do have that new Mexican president being voted in. That Mexican president is a communist dictator. He's inviting Madero, he's inviting the Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un over there, he's inviting Putin. Let's see if he accepts the invitation. He's inviting everybody there. These aren't good guys. He's leaning past socialism, and I'm not talking about politics here. I don't care about your politics or my politics. I care about the value of life and how to avoid conflict. But this man is allowing the largest communist leaders in the world and the largest communist armies in the world to set up shop in Mexico. America's dying for this wall, and they really want this wall, but if I was Canada, I would want a wall, to tell you the truth, because when shit hits the fan here in America, everybody's going to be going north because they're not going to be able to go south. So if I was Canada, if you guys are watching, build that wall and make America pay for it, because they're causing some shit in your backyard, and it's going to spread north really quick. So you have the Mexican armaments, the Russian armaments, all of this happening. Russia's basically just giving half of whatever it builds to Mexico, and they're getting everything tax-free. That is fact. You can check all that out. As far as the Air Force, the V-10 rockets. Hello, Germany. The V-10 bombers that came over from Russia. are in Venezuela, but they were in Venezuela for about a month and a half now. It hasn't been just a week or two. But they also have V-10s in Mexico, which has not been reported yet, which I find really interesting. I think that if we reported them being in our allies neighborhood, all hell would break loose. And until I bet you, when this Mexican president gets inaugurated, he'll straight out within a month come out and say, yeah, now we had invited these V-10 bombers over to Mexico too. So we're seeing a lot of troop movement. We're seeing Russians start staging their air force here because they can't really get their navy here. Their subs are all around us, don't get me wrong. Their nuclear class submarines are everywhere around the Pacific, around the East Coast, around the West Coast especially. We've already had the reports earlier this year come out, and basically the Russians come into the United States and be like, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. It was really annoying and very scary, but they did it because what we're doing right now with Russia, with the sanctions, they knew that the sanctions was the first step to a naval blockade. Naval blockades are the first step to an escalation of war after you have these staging setups. So we're seeing a lot of movement happening since the first time in World War II. And it's happening with smaller countries as well, not just the big players, not just the big games either. What's happening in South Africa is something to keep your eye on as well. South Africa does have a navy, South Africa does have an air force, South Africa does have an army. And whatever your political beliefs are with what should happen in South Africa, with this land grab and with the persecutions of Christians, the persecutions of white people, in my opinion, no white person should be owning land in South Africa. That's just my opinion, just because if you follow, they say follow the money. I'm so over that. Follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Follow the blood. Follow the blood trail, because all the money does is cover up the blood trail. And if you follow the blood trail of South Africa past the apartheid, you'll see that it was nothing but a giant game of kill and murder and take whatever you want. So it's like if someone takes or steals from me and I go down to the police department, I file a police report. Oh yeah, I lost my gold chain with the police department. This is the characteristics, this is the the make or the designer, and then I go down to a pawn shop and I see in the pawn shop and I show them my police report. That pawn shop in most states are legally have to give that to you because it is a police report, or they can give you some fraction of the value. So that's just what's happening in South Africa right now. They're pissed. They have no water. They're running out of water. There's no infrastructure for the water. Large portions of South Africa are going out without water, and this is a country that is well established, one of the most prominent countries in the region. So when you see a destabilization like that, we're starting to worry and wonder who the leader will turn out to be, how this is going to happen, and how this is going to affect the region, because coastal waters off of Africa, South Africa, Cape Town and whatnot, are extremely important for passageways to and from that west and east. So we'll see what happens there. The English Navy has the largest armada it has active in a very, very long time. Now, the English Navy has always been one of the strongest navies in the world. It's a very small navy at this point, but it is one of the most technically superior navies in the world. I know America has all this propaganda in our head that, oh, we're the best, we have the best navy, we have the best air force, we're technically superior, yada 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 yada. It's all bullshit. We're really not. I mean, when you see Marines going out there fighting with the same M16s and with the same rifles that we've had, Vietnam era equipment, just baffles me. It really does. Although you could give a Marine a rock and he'll probably be just as lethal with it than you would giving him an M1A4. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a really good way. But these our technology and our superiority has slipped major over the last 10 years. I don't know if that's, again, planned obsolescence, if you will, by the shadow governments, or if that's just what happens. In my opinion, this global conflict that's stirring up, that's definitely a global conflict. Boots on the ground and staging happening in Europe. Boots on the ground and staging and happening in Asia. Boots on the ground and staging and happening here in America when we have a militarized southern border. Naval blockades in the China Sea against China. Naval blockades in Russian contested territory against Russia. We are definitely the instigators in all of these situations. Now the question is, are we instigating a situation to destabilize the world because we have a threat to our petrodollar? Are we seeing Russia and China becoming the next world leaders, and are we trying to get them to attack us so that we can destroy them or recreate ourselves, destroy ourselves, and recreate a world currency to put us back on top? Or is it something else? If you see any attacks in the future, if you see anything in the United States, especially in the Gulf, if you see Iran attack one of our ships or vessels, or even, Lord forbid, a nuclear explosion happens somewhere in the Gulf, it would probably be instigated, if not just completely planned and carried out by us. So keep an eye on the skies and keep your head on your swivel, the boots on the ground, dude. Absolutely. There's some military movement going on right now that freaks me out. A buddy who has been giving me this information, he doesn't scare easily at all. I can't tell you who he is, but he has been in the Navy for about 25 years now, and he will be retiring here shortly. 5 years of it he was spent in the Army, 20 years of it he spent in the Navy, and he may retire, he may not retire, but he's pretty shaken. He's seen a lot in his time, and what we're seeing now has been unprecedented as far as the sheer number of movements happening and the sheer number of staging that's happening. Staging is huge because you don't stage unless war is imminent. You don't stage forward operating bases. You don't stage set and fixed locations for surface to surface, surface to air, anti-battery. You don't stage these things unless something's imminent. There's an imminent threat. There's an imminent danger. You're seeing land grabs by Russia towards its enemies because it needs more land. It needs to be able to move freely throughout these places without international eyes on it. So if you move into someone else's territory, all eyes are on you, but if you make it your territory first, no one will have to ever even know about it. So yeah, that's about it. I think I'm going to be focusing just a little bit more on troop movement. I'm going to get out some of my maps, and I think I'm going to do a map overhaul and kind of show you guys the number of troops that's happening. And once you really look back and you see it on the map, and you see, you know, the green dots, the red dots, and the blue dots, and you literally see how we are surrounding our enemies with Navy, and how Russia has already surrounded us with their nuclear-capable submarines. It makes everything kind of just stand out to you. War is imminent. This isn't fear porn, in my opinion, because we're not talking about specific threats to us. I'm not saying that the Cascadian subduction is going to blow off within 24 hours, so everybody needs to get ready to die. I'm not saying that there's going to be an EMP within the next 2 weeks, so everybody must prepare now. I'm not saying that there's a huge tsunami or earthquakes around the world that nobody knows about and we need to find out, because if not, we're all going to be obliterated. I'm not saying that aliens are coming back to kill us all. I'm not saying that there's going to be a false prophet or a false rapture. What I'm saying is the actions that have happened in human history since humans started history. War and rumors of war, but war is more real than any other topic you could hear about. I'm not saying or discrediting anything else, especially natural disasters. That's my number two. I mean, really, that's where preppers came from, was prepping for natural disasters. But we have a more imminent threat, and we are creating more dangers for ourselves than anything else. We are more likely to fall into World War III than we are to be attacked by aliens, have a premature rapture, have mega tsunamis, or have Cascadian subduction, or have a supervolcano blow up. Because, and I'll support this with just, again, facts and sprinkled with opinion, the timeline for these geological events are sometimes millions of years apart. We live as human beings maybe 60, 70, 80 years, 90 if you're lucky. So the chances of you being around during one of those are very, very slim to none. Although we do know that the Cascadian subduction is going to go, we do know that there's the faults, the New Madrid, we do know about these things. But besides having water, food, what are you going to do about it, really? What are you going to do about the tectonic plates, What are you going to do if there's a 1,000-foot tsunami headed your way? You're going to kiss your ass and die, that's what you're going to do. Now, what are you going to do when you start hearing about war? What are you going to do when you start hearing about Russia setting up troops? What are you going to be doing when you start hearing China is trying not to shoot at us? What are you going to do when you hear that your Navy, your Air Force, your Army, your Marines are poking every other country out there trying to instigate a war because its fiat petrol currency is under threat? What are you going to do about it? There's something we can do about not going to war because we are the ones who are going to war. There's nothing you can do about aliens. There's nothing you can do about the subduction zone. There's nothing you can do about the rapture coming besides get saved immediately. But we need to focus on this in particular. We need to stop being so splintered, celled, and so grouped. We need to pull a Bob Dylan. We need to be like our brothers and sisters in the 60s. We need to be beating the streets. We need to be having protest. We need to be out there supporting peace, not war. We need to not be fear-mongers. I don't mean fear porn, but we do not need to. We need to abstain from all those things. We have an imminent threat of World War III happening. Do you have children? If you have children, then you need to push this out there. The more you mix your words with, the more you mix your reality, your imminent dangers, with dangers that are less likely, people are going to tune you out. When you're talking about war that happens on a consistent basis throughout history of man, and you can see the timeline of war and what starts the war, you look at that and you'll realize that our time is coming. Although we've been at war technically for the last 17 years, I will tell you personally that was not a war. That was an extended banking system. Basically, we had a merger of two banks. That's what that was. And it costed a lot of lives, okay? But this will not be that. This isn't going to be a designed war to set up a central bank and help Halliburton, Cheney, and boost the Iraqi dinar and have a economic staging forward operating base in Iraq so we can spread the word around the Middle East. No, this is going to be territorial war instigated, in my opinion, probably by the United States. So we need to have these discussions. In my opinion, we need to focus more on the reality. We need to ground ourselves because everything else can be planned opposition. So when you hear these huge channels come out or these huge almost semi-celebrities and they're focusing on Saturnalia or they're focusing on good or the aliens coming back, and do some research on these people. Seriously, see where their money's coming from. Follow their blood trail. Because if I was the United States, if I belonged into the Interior, if I belonged to the Department of Defense, if I was in active intelligence communities now, like I was in 2008 till 2015, 14, Well, I would put out as much disinformation and propaganda to get you guys chasing wild fucking ghost stories and fairy tales instead of being on the reality trail of us instigating war with one another. I guess that's it. Go out there and start doing some real research. Stratfor is awesome. They have naval updates all the time, and Air Force updates all the time. But what's happening? You always need to focus on what's more likely to happen. Okay, focus on the military. Second to natural disasters. Everything else, you're preparing for things that may not even occur in your lifetime. Yeah, prepare for it, have it in the back burner, examine all things, but hold on to that which is good. And I'm not saying that war is good or natural disasters are good, but those are good information. Those are good threats that are going to happen. Again, look at the troop movement and just decipher for yourself. Open a history book and see when was the last time that we had armaments being blocked and Russia trying to leave with tanks. There's this old Kennedy, when Kennedy was in office, he had the standoff with Russia, and every time Russia would move tanks into one position to try and get out of Russia into, I think at the time it might have been the Ukraine, but it could have been Czechoslovakia, JFK would move his troops, and then they'd move tanks down somewhere else, and JFK would move his troops. The beautiful thing about JFK is he was a war hero. He did fight in a war. He wasn't like our coward leaders nowadays. He knew the cost of war and bloodshed. So even though he was being poked left and right, he did not want to go to war, which ended up getting him killed. That and the fact that he wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve. So be a Kennedy. As much as I hate politics, all of them, seriously, abstain from war, abstain from all evil, seek after that which is good for one another and for all people, examine all things and hold on to that which is good. Because there is definitely danger looming and danger afoot, and we do not want to take part of it. We do not want to instigate it, and we do not want to promote it. But if you're out there and you're not talking about this subject, and instead you're talking about an alien starship that possibly is going to be coming, who told you about that alien starship? Who told you that Humanama now entered our system? NASA did. Okay, our government did. Our government affiliates did. I'm not bagging or bashing on anybody who believes these things, but I'm saying that even if those things are occurring, even if that has happened, we are still more likely to blow ourselves up than have any kind of Will Smith scenario when aliens attack us, okay? Independence Day is probably far, far off as opposed to the Patriot, you know what I mean? Or just end of the world because of mechanized military. You know, Einstein did say this, not the million other quotes the internet says, but I have no idea what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. And basically, he just meant to say that we will obliterate ourselves. It is mutually assured destruction. Now, there is something that we can do to alter this path that we're on. There's something that we can do to change our heading and to change our course, but it will take something that's never happened in human history. It'll take, actually it has, his name is Gandhi, but it will take peace above all else. It will take us to not prepare for war and plan for peace, because you can't have it both ways. You can't have a militarized border, staging across the world, nuclear-capable submarines, new nuclear silos being built in the Pacific, and then also planning for peace. You can't be putting trillions of dollars into your defense spending and none into your social welfare programs and none into putting homeless vets in a house or homeless people in a house. You can't be spending billions of dollars on new strategic bombers and have people in America starving to death. Because at that point, nobody cares in America. They're too busy starving and freezing to death to care about war. They have a personal war of feeding themselves and staying warm. So something we can do as Americans is, and it might sound petty, and it might sound small, and it might sound insignificant, but if you see someone who's hungry, or if you see someone who's cold, give them a blanket, give them a jacket, give them food. If you see them without money, give them money. It's not doing you any good anyway. It's a debt note. You know, we're against these things. If you're stacking silver, give your silver away. I've given away pounds of silver at this point. You know, I've given away more silver than I own. We need to do this because it's that mentality that's infectious, that it starts at the root level and it will go up. I strongly believe that we can conquer war and we can end what's about to happen. I strongly believe that everything except for the Word of God can be changed. Now, if it's God's will that this is a war that, you know, brings on the apocalypse, then there's nothing we can do. But we need to act like this anyway. We need to act with love, charity, kindness, humility, patience. These are the things that is the antithesis of war. Anti-war rather. We need to spread the vaccine of hate, which is love. And the more we do that, the more we will see less bloodshed and more joy throughout the world. There's plenty of reasons why you open up the newspaper, you turn on your TV if you have one, and you read about war this, war that, tanks here, bombers there. And they're not talking about war because in your back of your mind, that's all you're preparing for. The United States for the last 17 years has been talking about nothing but war. It completely dominates my mind, I know. So let's put more love out there. The reason I brought up Gandhi, and I think there's a few other countries out there that I love talking about, but man, if you take a look at what Gandhi did at his revolution for one of the largest countries in the world without a shot being fired. I mean, that was a civil war technically. You know, there was an imposing occupied territory by England, and Gandhi organized and told his people, no, we can't have the civil war that's happening, that's imminently looming. We need to have peace. And look what happened with Gandhi. I mean, he won his country over with love and peace, okay? Regardless of how you feel about the man, regardless of how you feel about politics, that happened. I mean, like the prince himself, you know, when Spain was attacking into Africa, you know, he went over to the League of Nations, which was the precursor for the United Nations, and he had that huge, beautiful speech that we all know through Bob Marley, you know, until the philosophy which holds one man superior and another inferior has finally and completely and ultimately been discredited and abandoned, totally destroyed. All we'll have is war. And the League of Nations totally ignored him. And then he said, it is us today, it will be you tomorrow. And then what happened is, it wasn't Spain, it was Italy. It totally invaded his country, decimated his country, and within the next few years, the Italian, you know, Mussolini and German state rose and completely destroyed their countries throughout Europe. So I'm telling you guys, it is us today, it will be you tomorrow, and that is exactly what's going to go down unless we do something. We need to act now. We need to act immediately, because Ethiopia is was the Ethiopian prince. You know, a lot of people even praise him as a messiah. You know, the Rastafarian religion. But take a look at Ethiopia. Take a look at India. Take a look at these countries that have. Take a look at Kurdistan. Take a look at these countries that have defended itself in a righteous way. And look at their history, and look at how we skewed them, how we saw a thread of love and we had to terminate it. Keep an eye on the sky, keep looking at the military movements. Aloha kako, ahui ho, mahalo for stopping again. And until next time,